Hello and welcome back to Why You're Wrong, a new show where I look at some of football's biggest narratives to separate fact from fiction and let you know what you might be missing, as well as pointing out some mistakes of my own. And on today's show, we've got Graham Potter's Boring Blues, who are finally looking up. But first, it's the one you've all been asking for. Yeah, this one is going to be embarrassing for me. If you're wondering why it's taken a month for the show to address this topic, it's not because I was trying to avoid it. The pilot episode of Why You're Wrong, which is locked in the FD vaults, delved into exactly this subject. It's an interesting time to take a look at Eddie Howe, with Newcastle currently on a run of 1 win in 7 and having scored just 3 times since New Year's Eve. But before we discuss that, let's go back to November 2021, when Edward John Frank Howe, an ice cream sundae made with 4 different kinds of vanilla, was appointed Newcastle boss after 15 months away from the dugout. And at the time I was, let's say, a little bit skeptical.
I agree. I think Eddie Howe is literally the worst. Eddie Howe is probably the last manager in the world I would hire for this side. Like, I'm serious. No, you can't. You can't hire a team. You can't hire for a team that's set up like this a manager who has played wide open at the back and just tried to score goals at the other end. It is a disaster waiting to happen.
The Magpies were second bottom at the time with 5 points from 11, 24 conceded and 0 wins, and hiring Howe seemed an odd decision, given that the coach's success had come principally from creating attractive attacking sides with a defence-optional attitude, his Bournemouth team shipping an average of 65 goals per league campaign over his last 3 years at the club. And Newcastle's hierarchy wasn't totally sold on him either, trying to secure the services of Unai Emery and reportedly Brendan Rodgers before turning to Howe. Both guys who, for all their faults, had shown themselves capable of putting together a passable back line. It didn't seem set up for success, but another 15 months on and the Magpies are flying, with St James's a fortress once again and Champions League qualification a distinct possibility. On Howe's watch, the club has gone from 0.5 points a game to 1.8, with the tightest defence in the Prem and the fewest losses, while transfers like Alexander Isak and Anthony Gordon, who honestly I don't like at all, nonetheless demonstrate the change in the perception of Newcastle. It's somewhere good players want to go. And Anthony Gordon. So how did I get this one so wrong? Well, it's important to look at the claims that were made when Howe was appointed, because I was actually making the same assumptions as his defenders, but coming to a different conclusion. Yes, I am about to explain why I was wrong, but still kind of right. It's my show. Howe's supporters essentially said that he was good at Bournemouth, keeping an under-equipped side in the Prem against the odds. According to these people, Howe deserved credit for the Cherries' good attack, but not blamed for their bad defence, which was down to resources. If his Newcastle team adopted the Bournemouth template, but with better talent, they'd be solid. I, on the other hand, maintained that his Bournemouth teams were pretty bad. The attack had never been as good as claimed, only scoring significantly over a goal a game in 2 campaigns, and the defence had been appalling, as well as completely incapable of controlling matches. It seemed harsh, but it made sense of all the data and the eye test. Play like that and relegation was almost certain for Newcastle. So both the critics and the fans were making judgments from the same theory. Howe would play the same way at St James's that he did at the Vitality. But fortunately, Newcastle do not play like that at all. When Bournemouth got relegated in Howe's final season, they had the 4th worst rate of passes per defensive action in the league, meaning they disrupted their opponent's possession less often than 16 other Premier League clubs. And they weren't playing a functional deep block either. Bournemouth couldn't stop people getting into the box, with opponents managing about 9 deep completions against them per game. Those are successful passes within 20 metres of their goal. By comparison, other bad teams like Watford allowed under 7 a game. Bournemouth was so easy to beat, they turned into cherry sorbet under the slightest pressure. Newcastle have a totally different strategy. They use pressing to gum up the centre of the pitch and reduce traffic heading towards their back line. Currently, only 4 PL teams press harder than them, and that's translated into a 5th place ranking for opposition deep completions. They are awful to play against. Teams facing Newcastle complete just 76% of their passes, which is the 4th lowest in the Prem. And this energetic style carries over to the offence too, with the 3rd most direct attacks in England behind only Man United and Liverpool. Now those teams use Bruno Fernandes and Trent Alexander-Arnold to spring Marcus Rashford and Mohamed Salah. Newcastle use Kieran Trippier to find Miguel Almiron, and they're still making it work. Even the current cold streak is not as bad as it appears. Since December 31st, Newcastle may have just 8 points from a possible 21, but over that period they have the 4th best expected goal difference in the division, with the underlying metrics suggesting they could have anticipated allowing 8 goals instead of the 4 they have let in, but scoring 12 to the 3 they've actually managed, yielding something more like 12 points, just 5 fewer than Man City, who've played 2 extra matches in that period. There's no cause for concern here. So, overall, in simple terms, I was very, very wrong. I thought Howe would be awful, and he's been excellent. But in a deeper sense, I don't entirely retreat from my position. Bournemouth Eddie Howe would have been a terrible appointment for Newcastle, and it's his humility, development, and some smart signings which have made the difference here, and which suggest he could get even better. Now, I'm going to be kind to myself and call this a partial L, but it's still an L in block capitals and 72-point font. Honestly, I can't believe that we're expected to take managers seriously with names like Eddie Howe and Graham Potter, but here we are. And once again, I am defending sourceless substitute teacher Potter, who is getting far too much grief right now for a Chelsea side, which is starting to take shape. The Englishman seemed like he'd provide a smooth transition from Thomas Tuchel in the autumn, with a possession-based back 3 setup, but the early returns for his Chelsea side were genuinely awful. They took 11 points in 8 games between his appointment on September 8th and the resumption of football after the World Cup. But arguably, they deserved even less, netting 9 from 8 XG and conceding 8 from 13 XG, placing them 16th in the league by expected goal difference. Everyone looked like garbage. Kai Havertz was Chelsea's top scorer in that period with 2. That's how bad things were. Kai Havertz. But since the World Cup, Potter has switched things up, and while the results aren't coming yet, the performances are getting better. Having played a back 3 in 5 of 8 games before Christmas, he's done it just once in 9 since, and the press is dialed in for the first time, rising from 5th most aggressive in the league to 1st. Now, Chelsea have produced more XG than their opponents in 7 of 9 fixtures and outshot the opposition 13-10 on average. And it's important to recognise too that while Potter has been handed a ton of talent in Todd Boehly's ridiculous spending spree, he's also been tasked with gelling an unwieldy squad, with their 16 new signings boasting 12 different nationalities between them, while players like Mudryk and David Datro Fofana have arrived from divisions rated as low as 16th in Europe, according to UEFA. That means Potter is coaching players who've never faced such consistently tough opposition, who barely know their teammates, and who might not even share a language with their attacking or defensive partners. That is a tough assignment, and it's not Potter's fault that he's not Carlo Ancelotti or the owl from Duolingo. The worst thing Chelsea could do right now is add to the chaos of that dressing room by turfing out the manager in favour of someone new, and the signs are pointing in the right direction, not least in a dangerous away display against Borussia Dortmund, which deserved better than a 1-0 defeat. If fans can do what the club hierarchy seems to have done and accept that this season is already gone, maybe they can see Potter's work in a more charitable light. So that's why you're wrong for this week. Thank you for watching, and hit us up with your suggestions of other things I got wrong, as well as your most treasured football opinions, and you could be featured on next week's show. Get your entries in the comments below, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.